These bullies don't realize that the prisoner they are bullying is a professional heavyweight boxer. Marcus Gates never imagined his life would take him to Ravenwood Penitentiary. A month before, he was the undefeated heavyweight champion of the world, a beloved athlete with countless fans, an immaculate record, and a promising future. Now he was just inmate number 98,427, shoulders weighed down by an orange jumpsuit and the shame of a conviction he insisted was wrong. Marcus's fall from grace happened swiftly. One evening, a close colleague on his promotional team was murdered. Circumstantial evidence led the police straight to Marcus, who'd been the last to see the victim alive. Despite his protests of innocence, the courts found him guilty of manslaughter. As the gavel fell, he watched his mother break down in sobs and his father stare blankly into space. Marcus felt his stomach turn inside out. How could the same justice system that praised him for his charity and civic contributions condemn him so quickly? His legal team had filed an appeal, convinced there was a witness who could exonerate Marcus if they'd only come forward. But appeals take time. Until then, he had to survive in Ravenwood, a high-security prison notorious for housing the toughest and meanest felons in the state. On his first day, Marcus walked through a dim, claustrophobic corridor flanked by guards holding batons. The air smelled of bleach and stale sweat. Everywhere he looked, he saw eyes glaring from behind bars, hardened criminals, their stares devoid of mercy. The distant clank of steel doors and the echo of curses gnawed at his nerves. He focused on controlling his breathing as the guard led him deeper into the prison's labyrinth, eventually stopping at a cell in Block D. An older inmate named Reese occupied the top bunk, a wiry man with harsh lines on his face. He barely acknowledged Marcus as the guard shut the bars. Dressed in shapeless prison garb, Marcus felt more vulnerable than ever. He was used to bright lights, roaring crowds, and the confidence that came from dominating a boxing ring. Now he slept on a thin mattress and had no special privileges or accolades. Marcus decided not to reveal he was the legendary boxer. He wanted anonymity, at least until his appeals set him free. If other inmates found out who he was, it might bring more trouble. Some might try to make a name for themselves by taking down a champion. Others might extort him, believing he was wealthy. Every morning, he woke at dawn to do quiet exercises, push-ups, sit-ups, and occasional shadowboxing. The movements reminded him of who he once was and kept him from spiraling into despair. But Ravenwood had its own rules, enforced not just by guards, but by the unofficial hierarchy of gangs and cliques. The biggest troublemakers in Block D were a group called the Five Fingers. Their leader, Domino, was a wiry man with cold, calculating eyes. Domino's enforcers, Pablo and Haas, were physically intimidating, ensuring few dared defy them. Marcus hoped to keep off their radar, but that hope soon vanished. On Marcus's second day, he lined up in the mess hall for a tasteless meal of watery stew and stale bread. Domino slid into line ahead of him and snatched Marcus's tray away with a sneer. "New fish, around here we don't wait for permission," Domino said, tossing the tray behind him. "In Ravenwood, we take what we want." Marcus bit his tongue and did nothing. A wave of heat flared in his chest, an urge to put Domino in his place. But he fought it down. With an appeal in the works, he couldn't afford any disciplinary strikes. Still, the humiliation stung. Domino and his men barked out mocking laughter. That evening, Marcus sat on his bunk, replaying the incident. Reese, his cellmate, shuffled a deck of contraband cards. Smoke from a hidden cigarette drifted in the stale air. "Best keep your head down," Reese muttered. "This place smells fear like blood in the water. You stand out if you don't stand up for yourself, but if you fight back, the guards won't think twice about locking you in the hole." Marcus frowned. "So what do you suggest?" "Survive," Reese said, shrugging. "If you've got an outside shot at freedom, don't blow it." Days passed. Marcus aimed for a routine: quietly eat, exercise, read old library books, and avoid drama. But staying invisible only worked for so long. In the prison yard, he found a quiet corner to do push-ups. Domino and his two goons sauntered over, blocking the sunlight. Domino flicked a cigarette to the ground and crushed it under his heel. "You got some nerve ignoring me," Domino said. "Canteen tokens, commissary goodies, those belong to me. Ain't that right, boys?" Marcus rose and stood tall at 6'4". He loomed over Domino, who was much smaller. But Domino had the numbers advantage and the iron confidence of a man who believed he owned Ravenwood. "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said carefully, fighting the instinct to flatten all three with a flurry of punches. "That's too bad," Domino sneered, yanking a handful of canteen tokens from Marcus's pocket. "Trouble's already here." Marcus's heart hammered, But he let them take the tokens. He reminded himself of his mother's tears in the courtroom, his father's clenched jaw. Getting into a brawl might ruin everything. Domino and his goons left laughing, each footstep echoing Marcus's sense of frustration and shame. One afternoon, Marcus was approached in the chow line by a short, wiry inmate named Curtis. He had kind eyes and moved like someone who paid attention to every detail. "You're handling this all wrong," Curtis said softly. Marcus stiffened, unsure if this was a trap. "What do you mean?" "I've been in Ravenwood a long time," Curtis explained, voice low so no guard would overhear. "You keep letting Domino push you around. He'll never stop. I know you've got training. I see it in your stance." Marcus tried to deny it, but Curtis just smiled knowingly. "Listen, I'm not saying you should start a riot, but Ravenwood respects strength. If you don't show Domino you can defend yourself, he'll bleed you dry." Curtis's words echoed Marcus's own inner turmoil. He thanked Curtis but left quickly, not wanting to draw more attention. Still, he replayed the conversation in his head, trying to figure out how to preserve his chance at appeal and avoid being swallowed up by the prison's toxic pecking order. A glimmer of hope arrived when Marcus was called to the visitation room. Separated by a pane of glass, his mother Evelyn looked at him with watery eyes and a trembling smile. "Oh, Marcus," she said, her voice cracking through the telephone receiver. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," Marcus replied, forcing a steady tone. "How's Dad?" "He's trying to pull strings, calling anyone who will listen," Evelyn explained. "Your lawyers believe there's a witness who can prove you weren't anywhere near the crime scene. But this person is scared. They haven't come forward yet." Marcus closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. For the first time since stepping into Ravenwood, he felt a burst of real hope. "If this witness testifies, I can get out of here, Mom. Maybe soon." She nodded, tears glistening. "Just stay strong and stay safe. We're working day and night." Hearing her voice gave Marcus the resolve to carry on. If there was a genuine path to freedom, he wouldn't let Domino or anyone else derail him. But Ravenwood never let optimism go unchallenged. A day later, Marcus returned from the yard to find his cell ransacked. The few personal items he had, a spare t-shirt, socks, toothbrush, were gone. All that remained was a note scrawled in pencil, "Pay up or pay the price." That night, Reese shook his head at Marcus. "Domino isn't going away. You either fight back or watch every crumb vanish." Marcus felt a swirl of frustration, rage, and fear. He'd never ducked a fight in the ring. There he was confident. But here, one mistake could bury his appeal. As he stewed, footsteps approached. Pablo and Haas blocked his path just outside his cell. "Domino wants your shoes," Pablo said, nostrils flaring. "Hand him over, fish." Marcus stared at his cheap prison sneakers. "They're worthless," he retorted. "Don't matter," Haas sneered. "He says everything you own is his." Marcus's anger flared. Each day, they stripped him of something: tokens, personal belongings, dignity. He clenched his jaw, searching the corridor for guards. None in sight. Could he handle these two without permanent damage? Pablo shoved him hard. Marcus's lips split against the cold cement wall. He forced himself to stay calm. But a champion boxer only endures so much. Haas swung a punch, expecting an easy hit. Marcus ducked, the reflexes of a professional fighter kicking in. Haas's punch whistled by his shoulder, throwing him off balance. Pablo lunged. Marcus sidestepped, using minimal force to send him stumbling into Haas. In that moment, it felt like one of his training drills: smooth footwork, perfect timing. He prayed no guards were around to witness. The surprise on Pablo's face was unmistakable. But before the scuffle could escalate, a guard's baton rapped loudly against metal. "Break it up," echoed down the hall. Pablo and Haas froze. They exchanged furious looks and backed away. "This ain't over," Pablo hissed as they retreated. Marcus stood there, breathing heavily, lips stinging, adrenaline racing through his veins. He realized he'd revealed too much skill. Soon, Domino would hear about it. The bullies wouldn't let this slide, and next time they'd come at him more prepared. Reese examined Marcus's bloodied lip. "You done opened a door, kid," he muttered. "Domino won't like this. The question is, how far are you willing to go?" Marcus stared at the peeling concrete walls, feeling cornered in every sense. He wanted nothing more than to go home, to prove his innocence. Yet Domino's gang seemed intent on pushing him until he either broke or fought back. He lay on his bunk that night, replaying the confrontation. Part of him felt relief. He'd defended himself without causing serious injury or attracting a guard's report. Another part of him trembled. He was no longer invisible. Word spreads fast in prison. Domino would want payback. Sleep came fitfully. Overnight, he jolted awake to distant yells. A fight broke out somewhere else in the block, punctuated by guard whistles and the thud of bacons. This was Ravenwood's reality, a place where violence was routine. Marcus realized he'd been fooling himself thinking he could hide forever. At breakfast, Curtis caught Marcus's eye, nodding in silent acknowledgement. Marcus could almost hear Curtis's earlier advice: bullies never stop on their own. Domino would keep pushing until Marcus snapped. The only question was whether Marcus would risk his appeal to stop him. As Marcus forced down lukewarm oatmeal, that single question seized him. He had no illusions. He was bigger and stronger than most inmates here. He also had lethal skills that could end a fight in seconds, but using them risked solitary confinement, new charges, or an extended sentence. The mere thought churned his stomach. His mother's hopeful face at the visitation window kept flashing in his mind. That evening, Marcus returned to find his cell eerily silent. Reese was off playing cards. The overhead bulb flickered. He sank onto his bunk, pressing a hand against the throbbing bruise on his lip. The sense of looming danger was undeniable. Domino wouldn't rest until he'd made a brutal example of Marcus, or until Marcus gave him a reason to back off. Marcus glanced at the small window near the ceiling. A pale sliver of moonlight crept in, too faint to offer comfort. In the darkness, all he could see was the shape of the bunk and the bleak outlines of chipped walls. He had once been the unstoppable champion in a ring brimming with cheers. Now he lay in a cell, stripped of accolades, awaiting a chance at justice that seemed so fragile. He shut his eyes, determined to steady his pounding heart. Domino, Pablo, and Haas might come at him tomorrow or the next day or any moment. Marcus clung to the hope of his appeal. Maybe that witness would emerge, maybe the evidence would clear his name. But even if he won his legal battle, he still had to survive the war inside Ravenwood's walls. Tomorrow or the day after, he might have to unleash the champion for the sake of survival. The thought terrified him. For now he swallowed his fear, letting the ache in his lip and the hammer of his pulse remind him that the longer he hesitated, the harder they'd push. Sooner or later, the fight would come. The only question was whether he'd rise to meet it before it tore him apart from the inside. Marcus woke to the clang of cell doors and the buzz of fluorescent lights. Another day in Ravenwood, another day living with a sense of dread. He sat up on his bunk, still rattled from the near-altering with Domino's gang. Though he hadn't openly revealed his fighting skills, rumors had spread. A few inmates whispered about his fast reflexes. Others speculated he had martial arts training. If the wrong person probed too deeply, they'd realize he was more than just a tall newcomer. The chow hall brimmed with noise. Guards yelled orders, and inmates shuffled in line to receive their bland meal trays. Marcus surveyed the tables and spotted Domino, Pablo, and Haas tucked in one corner. Their group expanded to include two new faces, each with the cold stare of men accustomed to violence. Trepidation gnawed at Marcus's gut. He found the table against the far wall, hoping to blend into the background. Curtis soon sat across from him, voice subdued. "They're talking about you, you know." Marcus stared at the watery oatmeal. Figures. Guess I can't slip by unnoticed anymore. Curtis shook his head. Once Domino labels you a threat, he won't quit until he's sure you're under his thumb. If you don't stand up to him, he'll drain you dry, but if you fight, the guards will label you a troublemaker. Great choices, Marcus muttered, shoulders tense. He forced down a spoonful of oatmeal and exhaled. I just want to survive until my appeal comes through. Be careful. No matter what you do, Domino's not going away. A bark from the guards signaled the end of breakfast, cutting their conversation short. Marcus dropped off his tray, unsettled by the weight of Curtis's words. Domino was systematically tightening the noose around him. Armed guards patrolled the watchtowers, scanning the expanse for any sign of trouble. Marcus wandered to a corner patch of cracked concrete. He began an improvised workout, push-ups, squats, a bit of light shadowboxing if he thought no one was watching. Exercise helped him focus, but he couldn't ignore Domino's presence. The wiry man was standing with his crew near a set of makeshift weights, occasionally casting Marcus dark looks. Marcus pretended not to notice, but adrenaline surged. Any moment could become the flashpoint for another attack. He bent low to tie his shoelaces, heart drumming in his chest, and resisted the urge to size Domino up. A loud whistle signaled yard time was ending. Inmates began funneling through gates into the corridors. For today, no confrontation had erupted. But he sensed Domino was only biding his time. After the yard, Marcus returned to his cell to find Reese counting a small stash of contraband cigarettes. Reese glanced at Marcus's stiff demeanor. "You look spooked." "I'm just on edge," Marcus admitted. He flopped onto the bottom bunk, arms crossed. "Domino's watching every move I make." Reese took a drag of a cigarette. "That's his style. He waits until you feel cornered. Then he strikes hard." Marcus pictured the handful of canteen tokens left in his locker. If Domino demanded them, Marcus would have nothing left for hygiene items or even a small snack to break the monotony. Worse, Domino might go after Reese or Curtis if Marcus refused. Reese exhaled smoke, his eyes sympathetic. "You can't keep playing nice, Marcus. Sooner or later, you'll have to hit back, or they'll bury you." Marcus bit his lip. The memory of his last fight in the ring flashed in his mind, the roar of the crowd seeming a lifetime away. "I'm trying not to make waves, but he's not giving me a choice." That afternoon, a guard escorted Marcus to Warden Phillips's office. The warden leaned forward at his desk, eyes narrowed. "Gates, I've received conflicting stories about your encounters with Domino and his men. Domino claims you threatened him, while you say he's extorting you. Any truth to these allegations?" Marcus took a controlled breath. "Domino's the one harassing me, sir. I've given him canteen tokens just to avoid trouble." Phillips frowned. "There's a fine line here. If either side escalates, I'll throw everyone involved in solitary. You have a pending appeal. Let me remind you that any record of violence could sabotage it." "I understand." Marcus felt a swell of relief the warden hadn't uncovered his boxing past, but the warning was clear: any fight would be pinned on him. Phillips wanted quiet, not justice. As he left, Marcus's thoughts churned. The warden's stance placed him in a catch-22. Tolerate Domino's demands or risk a fight and lose the appeal. Perhaps Domino knew this dynamic and planned to exploit it. The dread pressed heavier on Marcus's chest. Evening came and Marcus trudged back from dinner. At his bunk, he found a crumpled note scrawled in pencil: "Laundry room. Midnight, don't be late." A chill radiated through his body. Ravenwood's laundry room was a blind spot with few cameras and minimal guard patrols. If Domino was calling him there, it meant a trap. Marcus showed the note to Reese. His cellmate grimaced, flicking ash into a small tray. "It's definitely a setup, but if you don't go, they'll find you in your cell, maybe jump you in your sleep." Swallowing hard, Marcus slumped onto the bunk. "I can't get thrown into solitary, not now. But I can't just roll over either." Reese studied him. "You have any plan to handle them without looking like the aggressor?" Marcus shook his head. "I'll try to defend myself without throwing full punches. If the guards come, I'll claim self-defense." "Be careful, kid. Domino's not above pulling a shiv." Nerves on fire, Marcus crept into the laundry room just before midnight. The hot, humid air smelled of detergent and mildew. Rows of metal bins sat in disarray, large enough for someone to hide behind. Domino and his 3 henchmen, Pablo, Haas, and a lanky figure with gang tattoos, stood by the back wall. Domino's eyes glittered with malice as Marcus approached. "So you've got spine after all," Domino sneered. "We have unfinished business, fish. You owe me." Marcus's chest constricted. "I have nothing else to give. I barely have tokens left." Domino leaned forward. "It's not about tokens now. You made me look weak twice. That kind of disrespect calls for blood." A sliver of metal glinted in Domino's hand, a homemade blade. Marcus's pulse thundered. If Domino had a weapon, the risk to his own safety soared. But if Marcus injured Domino or his men, the warden would see it as an attack. Still, there was no way to talk Domino down. The hallway was empty of guards. Marcus's stomach knotted. Pablo took a step forward, fists raised. "How about we teach you manners first?" Haas, mountainous and heavily tattooed, cracked his knuckles. The lanky one hovered near the doorway, likely to block any escape. Marcus forced a calm stance. "Don't do this," he warned, voice steady. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Domino's lip curled. "I know exactly who you are, a dead man walking." Domino lunged, blade slashing in a downward arc. Marcus spun sideways, years of honed reflexes taking over. The blade whipped past him, slicing only air. With a swift motion, Marcus trapped Domino's wrist, forcing the man to drop the shiv. It clattered on the concrete floor. Enraged, Pablo threw a punch. Marcus barely dodged, hooking an arm under Pablo's elbow and flipping him into a rolling bin. The bin toppled with a metallic crash, clothes and linen sprawling everywhere. Haas rushed in next, swinging a ham-sized fist. Marcus slipped under the strike, a boxer's fluid footwork guiding him. The temptation to deliver a knockout punch flared, but he thought about the warden's warning. Instead, he grabbed Haas by the shoulder and shoved him away. Haas stumbled, arms flailing. Domino snatched up the blade again. This time, Marcus disarmed him with a quick trap and twist maneuver, the blade skidding out of reach. A frantic hush fell over the laundry room, broken only by the thrum of washers. The gang members exchanged confused glances. They hadn't expected Marcus to be so precise. Scrambling to his feet, Pablo grabbed Marcus around the waist. Marcus threw an elbow back, clipping Pablo's ribs. Pablo grunted and released him. In a single pivot, Marcus slid away, nearly colliding with Haas, who lunged again. With little choice, Marcus landed a short jab to Haas's jaw. The big man's knees buckled. The short, controlled punch was enough to daze him. Domino, chest heaving, locked eyes with Marcus. Marcus's heart pounded. One brutal strike might put Domino down, but it could cost him an appeal. He forced himself to hold back. "Stay down," he hissed, chest tight. Domino spat, face twisted with rage. He glared at the blade lying on the floor, but Marcus stood between him and the weapon. Pablo crawled away, clutching his ribs. Haas groaned, head lolling. "You're messing with the wrong people," Domino growled. "Sooner or later, you'll slip, and we'll finish you." Marcus's jaw clenched. "Why not just let me be?" "Because you humiliated me," Domino snapped. "I won't stop until you're begging for mercy." Marcus realized any negotiation was pointless. Domino wouldn't yield. The only reason the gang retreated now was the shock of Marcus's skill. But that wouldn't last. The desire for revenge glowed in Domino's eyes. Domino backed off with a hateful glare. "Let's go," he snarled to his men. "We'll settle this another time." Marcus watched them leave, his breathing ragged, sweat trickled down his face. Every muscle in his body trembled, not from fear, but from the tension of holding back. Part of him wanted to unleash the champion boxer he was, end the threat once and for all. But a savage beating might add years to his sentence. With Domino gone, Marcus sank to the floor. The washers clanked monotonously, oblivious to the brawl. His mind spun. He'd narrowly avoided serious violence, but the conflict was far from over. Domino would regroup, maybe find more allies or even buy off guards. Dragging himself out of the laundry room, Marcus scouted the corridor for patrolling guards. None in sight. His mind buzzed with uneasy thoughts. If a guard had seen him strike Haas, that alone could send him to solitary. If Domino filed a complaint first, Marcus might lose credibility. The warden, despite knowing Domino was trouble, had already warned Marcus to steer clear of any altercation. He slipped into Block D, heading for his cell. Reese stood by the bars, worry etched on his face. That sounded like a war zone. Marcus gave a faint nod. "They came at me with a blade," he whispered, wiping sweat from his brow. "I managed to get out without any guard busting in. But Domino's furious." Reese cursed under his breath. "He's a snake. He'll wait for a better opportunity." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "I've tried everything. Giving up tokens, staying low, none of it works. He wants total control." Reese looked at Marcus's bruised knuckles. "You got out alive. That's something. But how long can you keep this up?" Marcus collapsed on his bunk, body aching from the frantic grappling. He thought about the letter from his mother, the possibility of a witness stepping forward. Freedom hung just within reach, but each day in Ravenwood felt like a ticking clock. If Domino orchestrated a more vicious ambush, Marcus might not have the luxury of restraint. Curtis drifted to the cell door, gaze sweeping over Marcus's battered form. Her Domino left the laundry room limping. Is that true? Marcus nodded grimly. He won't forget it anytime soon. Curtis offered a small, rueful smile. Might keep him at bay for a few days, but don't assume it's over. He might even try rallying other gangs against you. Marcus swallowed. If that happens, I don't know. We'll do what we can, but we're not a real gang, Curtis said. We can't offer the kind of backup Domino has. The silence weighed heavily. Marcus felt trapped between the unstoppable force of Domino's gang and the immovable wall of the prison system. Even if Domino paused his assaults, the threat hovered. That night, Marcus lay wide-eyed on his bunk, replaying the laundry room fight in his mind. He'd done just enough to survive without inflicting major injuries, but how long could he balance on that razor's edge? One slip-up, one actual knockout punch, could sabotage the very appeal that might free him. As the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, he reminded himself of the witness who might testify. If it came through, he could be out in a matter of months. He just had to stay clean, avoid charges, and somehow keep Domino at bay. But a hollow feeling in his chest warned him. Domino wouldn't rest until he'd reclaimed his dominance. Whatever came next would likely be deadlier, more cunning. And next time, Marcus might not escape unscathed or unnoticed by the guards. He squeezed his eyes shut, mind whirling with dread, imprisoned by circumstance, burdened by a secret identity. He'd never felt so close to losing everything he fought for. If the day came when he had no choice but to let the champion boxer loose, would his hope for justice vanish the instant his fist struck? The question dug at him. At Ravenwood, moral lines blurred in the face of survival, and the final bell was still nowhere in sight. Marcus was sure every eye in Ravenwood Penitentiary was on him. Word of his latest encounter with Domino spread quickly, and rumor had it Domino was now rallying more allies to avenge his wounded pride. Even the guards seemed warier, lingering near Marcus as if expecting trouble to erupt at any second. He navigated the corridors with shoulders tight, fully aware that any misstep could undo his last hope of appeal. A restless night after the laundry room ambush, Marcus awoke to the clanging of cell doors echoing through Block D. He rubbed bleary eyes, peeling himself off the bunk. Reese, already up, flicked a glance at Marcus. Heard Domino's been talking to the highway serpents, Reese said in a low tone. Those guys are dangerous, smugglers, brawlers, you name it. Marcus felt his gut twist. So he's recruiting more muscle. Likely, Reese replied. He wants to tip the scales. You showed him up in front of his crew. Now he's going for numbers. Marcus nodded grimly. Sooner or later, he'll come at me again. Don't underestimate the serpents, Reese warned. They're not pushovers, and they're always hungry for advantage. Marcus exhaled a shaky breath, trying to quell his dread. He thought about the battered watch his father had given him, the one that still clung to his wrist. Domino would love to tear it away. If that happened, Marcus didn't know how he'd hold on to his sanity. At breakfast, Marcus spotted Domino sitting at a table with 3 men sporting matching tattoos of a coiled snake. Their faces wore guarded expressions, but Domino was all smirks. The fleeting glance Domino shot Marcus felt like a challenge. Across the mess hall, Curtis waved Marcus over. Marcus settled into a seat, glancing at the meager scoop of runny eggs on his tray. Looks like Domino's joined forces with the highway serpents, Curtis murmured. I count at least 4 new guys around him. Marcus grimaced. Didn't take him long. Domino's good at forging alliances, Curtis continued. He's got the devil's charm, plus he promises them a cut of your commissary and anything else they can extort. Marcus stabbed at his eggs, appetite gone. Then I'm outnumbered for sure. Curtis set his spoon aside. Not everyone's on Domino's side, but many don't want the heat. You and I, plus a handful of others, aren't enough to deter them. Marcus rubbed the sore muscles of his forearm. He could almost feel the confrontation looming, perhaps in the showers, the yard, or some dark corner near the storage rooms. Avoiding Domino day after day felt impossible. I'm not forming a gang, Marcus muttered. I can't risk more trouble. Curtis gave him a knowing look. Domino is counting on that. A guard's bark cut their conversation short. Marcus glanced back to see Domino's new entourage locked in laughter, occasionally turning their sneers his way. Cold apprehension gnawed at his chest. That afternoon, Marcus was summoned to the visitation room, a bare space divided by glass partitions. His heart pounded, hoping it was his mother or father with good news. Instead, he found a suit-clad man with salt and pepper hair on the other side of the glass. Marcus recognized him as Brian, the lead attorney working on his appeal. Marcus picked up the phone. Brian, is there a breakthrough? Brian gave a weary nod. Possibly. We've located the witness we discussed. They claim to have seen someone else leaving the scene of the murder. Our private investigator is verifying details, but if it checks out, we'll file a motion for a retrial. Marcus felt an adrenaline surge. Freedom, once distant, suddenly glimmered on the horizon. How soon could that happen? It'll take time, Brian cautioned. We need to secure a sworn statement. If all goes well, you could be looking at a new hearing in a few months. Maybe less. Relief tangled with anxiety. Just a few more months in Ravenwood, he muttered, pressing a hand to the glass. I can hold out. Brian frowned, leaning closer. Be careful. If you get caught in a violent incident or become a disciplinary problem, the judge might not grant bail during the retrial. Keep your record clean. Marcus nodded. Easier said than done here, but I'll try. He'd hung up, nerves still humming. A few more months. If he could dodge Domino's wrath for that long, he could walk out of Ravenwood a free man. But everything depended on him staying out of major conflict. That night, Marcus lay awake, replaying the attorney's words. He only had to survive a short stretch longer. But Domino's alliance with the Highway Serpents changed the playing field. Marcus shuddered to imagine how far Domino might escalate. Eventually, Marcus slipped into a fitful slumber. Images of fists, blades, and screaming crowds blurred in his dreams. He woke at dawn, drenched in sweat, the faint echo of his mother's voice consoling him in the recesses of his mind. Throughout the morning, he caught glimpses of Domino's crew whispering near the showers, the rec area, and the library. Their smug looks made Marcus's skin crawl. He could only guess they were plotting the best moment to corner him again. Right before lunch, a note appeared on Marcus's bunk: meet at the old storage room behind the kitchen. It bore no signature, but he knew who sent it. Marcus stared at the scrawled words. If he ignored the note, Domino's men might assault him in his cell. If he walked into the trap, at least he could plan an escape route or find a chance to reason with them. Reese sighed when he saw the note. They aren't giving you space. Marcus set his jaw. I'll go. Better to see what they want than wait in fear. Shortly after lunch, Marcus slipped from the cafeteria's rear exit, following a hallway that led to an old storage area. Rumors said the room was mostly abandoned, an ideal spot for shady dealings. Domino and 3 men waited. 2 were members of the Highway Serpents, sporting snake tattoos on their forearms. 1, a towering figure called Diesel, wore a grin that screamed trouble. The other, Jax, had a sly, calculating gaze. Marcus halted a few yards away, trying to keep his posture neutral. What do you want? Domino stepped forward, the faint scar on his cheek highlighted by the flickering light. You become a thorn, Gates. You're more trouble than you're worth. The Serpents and I see an opportunity. An opportunity? Marcus repeated warily. Domino paced in a slow circle. We heard rumors. You fight too well for an average inmate. Word is you might be a boxer, maybe even a pro. A chill climbed Marcus's spine. Could Domino truly suspect the truth? He forced an indifferent expression. You're imagining things. I just pick up moves from watching action flicks. Diesel snorted, clearly unconvinced. Domino smirked. You sure about that? Because I got a proposal. Fight for us in the underground matches. The Warden looks the other way on certain events. The Serpents host the fights. You step into the ring, throw a few matches if we say so, and we'll cut you in on the profits. More importantly, you'll have our protection. Marcus's stomach lurched. Underground fights? If the Warden was involved, it suggested corruption at the highest level. I'm not interested, he said flatly, fists curling at his sides. I'm done fighting. Domino's eyes flashed. You don't have a choice. Either you fight for the Serpents and take a dive when we say, or we'll make your life a living hell. You'll never see your appeal. Diesel took a step forward, rolling his massive shoulders. We have ways to ensure your cooperation. Marcus's pulse thundered. They were blackmailing him, offering a twisted alliance to keep him safe from daily harassment, provided he surrendered his integrity and rigged matches. I said no, he repeated, voice tense. I won't help you run some crooked fight circuit. Domino's mouth curved into a dark smile. Then you better prepare to bleed, because we'll come at you day after day until you break. Marcus's jaw locked. If he refused to join them, he'd face relentless attacks. If he accepted, he'd betray everything he stood for, not to mention risking further prison time if discovered. He backed away, scanning the dim corners for an exit. Stay away from me, he warned. Diesel's grin faded. Jax cracked his knuckles. But Domino lifted a hand, stopping them. Let him go, Domino commanded, eyes never leaving Marcus. We'll give him some time to realize he's got nowhere else to run. Marcus slipped out the door, pulse hammering. The corridor's fluorescent light stung his eyes, but he forced his breathing steady. He might have escaped physically, but Domino's ultimatum clung to him like a vise around his neck. Marcus found Curtis in the library soon after. He recounted the confrontation, keeping his voice low. Curtis listened, face grim. An underground fight ring? That's bigger than Domino alone. The Serpents have been rumored to run gambling rackets, but with the Warden's blessing, that's huge. They want me to take dives, Marcus said, trembling with anger. They'll use violence to coerce me. Curtis tapped a finger on the table. If you do it, you become their pawn. If you refuse, they'll try to break you. Either way, they hold the cards. Marcus sank into the chair, mind spinning. Every path led to disaster. Joining the fights meant betraying his conscience and risking official charges if caught. Denying Domino only earned him more enemies. Meanwhile, the clock ticked on his appeal, an appeal he'd forfeit if he got tangled in a major infraction. What if I expose them? Marcus asked suddenly, voice hushed. Curtis shook his head. Then Domino or the Serpents will retaliate, maybe even kill you. Even if you alerted the warden, he might already be on their payroll. Marcus swallowed hard. He felt trapped in a labyrinth of moral compromise. I can't do it. I refuse to be a puppet in some rigged fight. Curtis gazed at him sympathetically, then prepared to defend yourself. That evening, Marcus huddled on his bunk, rehearsing possible outcomes. If Domino forced a showdown in the yard, or if the serpents cornered him, he'd have to fight. But how many times could he protect himself without drawing guard attention? A knock on the cell bars startled him. A guard handed over a sealed envelope, the same official stationery used by his attorney. Marcus's hands shook as he opened it. The letter inside said the witness might testify sooner than expected. There was a chance Marcus could get a hearing in weeks, not months. He nearly sobbed with relief, but the tears never came. Even as hope flickered, the weight of Domino's threat pressed in. Could he really endure another few weeks? The memory of Domino's mocking grin and Diesel's hulking figure replayed in his mind, smothering the spark of optimism. Reese stirred from the top bunk. Good news? Maybe, Marcus managed, voice taut. The witness might speak up faster than we thought. That's great, Reese said softly. Just stay alive, okay. Don't let Domino ruin this. Marcus drew a long breath, eyes fixed on the flickering fluorescent bulb overhead. He had to tread carefully. Every confrontation, every scuffle, every rumor could tilt the scales. If Domino's alliance with the serpents escalated, Marcus might end up in a forced fight or a savage beatdown. He couldn't afford any mistake, yet any attempt to stay passive might turn him into a perpetual victim. He clenched his fists, a renewed determination rising despite the fear. For the sake of his parents, for the truth waiting to be revealed, he had to survive without sacrificing his principles. In the rain, Marcus had known victory through skill and discipline. Ravenwood demanded a different kind of fight, one where a single misstep could cost him everything. Marcus clutched the latest note from his attorney with trembling hands. The witness who could exonerate him was getting ready to come forward. In a matter of weeks, maybe even days, he might walk free. That precious news offered a sliver of light in the shadows of Ravenwood. But with Domino's new alliance and their pressure to join a secret fight circuit, the path ahead felt as perilous as ever. Sitting cross-legged on his bunk, Marcus read the lawyer's letter 3 times over. The cell's overhead bulb buzzed, highlighting every crease in the paper. Soon, you may get a hearing. A few more nights. Maybe he could last that long without caving to Domino or falling into a trap. Reese eyed him from the top bunk. Good news, I take it. Marcus nodded slowly. Could be. My lawyer thinks a hearing's close. But he trailed off, thinking about Domino's proposal for rigged fights. If he gave in, he'd be safe from constant harassment, maybe. But he'd forfeit his integrity and risk new charges if the underground ring was exposed. If he refused, Domino would keep coming, more vicious each time. You'll figure it out, Reese offered softly. Marcus forced a faint smile, though doubt swirled. He prayed that once the hearing date was set, he could survive Domino's gang until he walked out the gate. In the days following, Domino hung back, carefully observing Marcus from afar. During mealtimes, Domino would sit with Diesel and Jax, pointing and whispering. Their smirks felt like the hush before a storm. One afternoon, Curtis sidled up to Marcus in the library. They're planning something, he murmured. Heard chatter about a big event in the old auditorium. The serpents have the guards paid off to look the other way. Marcus swallowed, dread seeping into his stomach. Another underground fight? Curtis nodded. Likely. Word is they want a star attraction. Could be you. Marcus set down the dictionary he'd been skimming. I'm not fighting for them. Just be careful, Curtis warned. If the warden's in on this, Domino might corner you on every front. Marcus clenched his jaw. The thought of the warden's complicity made him feel sick. Ravenwood had always felt claustrophobic, but now it seemed every authority figure might be compromised. Each day, the sense of being trapped grew heavier. That night, Marcus was mopping the corridor floors under the watchful gaze of Officer Lively, one of the few guards who seemed halfway decent. Lively stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes flicking between the inmates. You look troubled, Gates, Lively commended quietly. Something on your mind? Marcus glanced around, ensuring nobody else was in earshot. Just the usual prison problems, he said carefully. Lively frowned. Domino's been huddling with the highway serpents. Not good news. If they're hassling you, I can't do much unless I catch them in the act. He paused. I've heard rumors, about an underground fighting ring. Marcus's grip tightened on the mop handle. I'm not involved. I believe you, Lively said, his voice low and cautious. But a few guards might be covering for Domino's operation. The warden turns a blind eye if it keeps certain inmates in check. You better watch your back. If they corner you, you'll have no allies but yourself. A bitter laugh escaped Marcus. I figured. Still, thanks for the heads up. Officer Lively nodded, then resumed his neutral guard stance. The quiet acknowledgement from a guard felt oddly comforting, but it also confirmed the pervasive rot within Ravenwood. Marcus pressed his lips together. He had to survive on his own terms, but how? 2 days later, an inmate known for peddling contraband approached Marcus in the courtyard. His name was Tuck, a small man with wary eyes. Tuck spoke with a hushed voice, glancing around nervously. Heard Domino's talking about a special match, supposed to happen in the old auditorium wing. They say it's a big money fight for the warden's private circle. Marcus felt the pulse of cold fear. They're setting up a spectacle. If Domino forced him into the ring, Marcus's talent would become public knowledge. Should he go down quietly or fight back and risk a disciplinary nightmare? Tuck lowered his voice further. They want you. Domino's bragging he has a secret weapon lined up. That has to be you. Marcus's temples pounded. I won't do it. Tuck shrugged, stepping away. Not up to me. Just be on guard. Later that evening, Marcus found another note on his bunk, short and chilling. Auditorium at midnight. This is your chance to make the right choice. A snake sketch coiled in the corner. No doubt it was from Domino's new serpent allies. Reese eyed the message. This is it, isn't it? They're pushing for a showdown. Marcus felt adrenaline spike. They can't force me to fight. Domino will do worse if you refuse, Reese warned. Marcus's fists clenched around the note, crumpling the paper. A seething mixture of frustration and fear brewed in his gut. If he obeyed, he'd be complicit in a rigged fight. If he refused, a savage beating might await him. Either path jeopardized his appeal. He recalled Brian's words, keep your record clean. In Ravenwood, that was a near impossible order. Midnight approached all too quickly. Marcus slipped out of his cell, muscles taut with apprehension. He navigated the dim hallways toward the old auditorium wing. Rumor said it was once used for inmate talent shows decades ago, now abandoned except for illicit activities. A single guard station lay empty. No surprise if the warden had cleared the area. Inside the auditorium, flickering floodlights illuminated a makeshift boxing ring at the center. A handful of inmates lounged on wooden bleachers. Domino stood ringside with Diesel and Jax. The tang of stale sweat clung to the air. Marcus's chest tightened. This was the underground fight circuit he dreaded. He spotted a few guards in the shadows, likely on Domino's payroll. One of them murmured into a walkie-talkie, ignoring Marcus' presence. The warden wasn't visible, but Domino had clearly arranged an event. Glad you could make it, Domino called, voice echoing off the peeling walls. He gestured to the ring. We got a match set up just for you. Do what we say, and maybe you walk out with minimal bruises. Marcus swallowed hard. I'm not fighting. Domino raised an eyebrow. Diesel, show him what happens when he refuses. Diesel, hulking and broad, climbed into the ring. He sneered. You can either step in and give the crowd a show, or I drag you in there myself. Your choice. From the corner, Jax tossed gloves in Marcus's direction. They landed at his feet with a thud that seemed louder than gunfire in the hush of the auditorium. Marcus's pulse roared. He stared at the battered gloves as if they were cursed objects. He didn't want any part of this, but refusing might mean a savage gang beating right here and now. And if the guards in the shadows were on Domino's side, no one would intervene. Marcus stepped closer to the ring, each footfall leading. I'm not here to throw a fight, he declared quietly. If this is your plan, I'm out. Domino smirked. Too late. The Serpents bet a lot of tokens on you losing in the second round. All you gotta do is take a dive by then. We'll keep you safe from any future trouble. Marcus's blood chilled. They not only wanted him to fight, they wanted him to throw the match. Rig a victory for Diesel. Fight or else. Diesel rumbled, cracking his neck. Realizing there was no escape, Marcus climbed into the ring. Around him, a handful of inmates cheered, anticipating blood. Domino and Jax watched with predatory delight, counting on Marcus to lose deliberately. His mind whirled. If he refused or won, Domino would turn the entire prison population against him. If he faked defeat, he'd become an accomplice to corruption, plus the stress of letting a brute like Diesel wail on him. Both options felt gut-wrenching. A makeshift bell clanged. Diesel lunged forward with unexpected speed, swinging hard. Marcus narrowly dodged. The crowd hollered for violence. Heat radiated off Diesel's fists as he pursued Marcus in short bursts. Even as Diesel advanced, Marcus sensed the difference in skill. Diesel might be large, but he was reckless. A well-trained fighter could exploit every opening. Ordinarily, Marcus would dispatch someone like Diesel in under a minute. But Domino's order was clear: fall by the second round. Diesel backed Marcus into a corner and threw a vicious hook. Marcus blocked it instinctively, elbow throbbing from the impact. He had to decide: would he obey Domino's demands or would he maintain his pride? "You better go down soon," Diesel hissed, voice low. Domino's got a lot riding on this. Marcus suppressed a surge of anger. With each strike, he was forced to remember that a real champion wouldn't rig a fight. His boxing career had been about honor, winning fair and square. Yet here he was, locked in a dirty brawl under threat of prison vengeance. The bell clanged again, a shaky signal that round one was over. Diesel smirked, turning to Domino for approval. Marcus's heart hammered. If he followed the script, he'd throw the fight in the next round. But what if he couldn't stomach that? His mind flickered to the letter from his attorney. A genuine chance at freedom was so close. Another voice in his head roared that he was a champion, not a puppet. The ring had once been his domain. Could he really let Domino cheat him into defeat? The second round bell rang. Diesel charged in again, launching a series of wild haymakers. Marcus slipped the blows with fluid footwork honed over years. Each dodge felt like a betrayal of Domino's plan and a declaration of war. Diesel, growling in frustration, lunged harder. Marcus felt the crowd's restless tension spike. Domino barked from ringside. "Go down, Gates. Stay down." Marcus closed his eyes for a split second, picturing his parents, their faith in him. One good punch could end Diesel's rampage. But what price would that victory exact? Domino would retaliate viciously. The warden's corrupt eye might place blame on Marcus alone. His appeal could be thrown out. Yet the thought of intentionally losing twisted his stomach. This was everything he'd spent years avoiding: cheating, lying, betraying the integrity of the sport he loved. In a heartbeat, Diesel swung high, leaving himself wide open. Marcus saw his chance. Time slowed. He could feel the memory of thousands of training hours surge through his muscles. Fear, shame, hope, and anger coalesced into a single electric moment. Marcus's fists clenched. He pivoted around Diesel's arm, bringing up a crisp left hook that smashed into Diesel's jaw. The impact echoed through the dusty auditorium. Diesel's eyes rolled back as he crumpled to the canvas with a low moan. A sudden hush fell. Marcus stood trembling, glove raised, breathing raggedly. He'd ignored Domino's order and reclaimed a shred of his dignity. But the consequences would be dire. Domino exploded with fury, slamming the side of the ring. Jax looked stunned. The small crowd muttered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Marcus had justified the entire system Domino and the Serpents had constructed. Panting, Marcus knelt by Diesel's limp form. The big man groaned, half conscious. Marcus signaled to the spectators. "He needs medical help," he rasped. Domino spat onto the floor. "You stupid. You're finished, Gates." Marcus locked eyes with Domino, unflinching. "I won't rid your fights." Jax tugged Domino aside before he could leap into the ring. For a split second, Marcus thought the guards might intervene. But the guards lurking in the background stayed still, as if waiting for Domino to decide the next move. Finally, Domino hurled a stool across the stage. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You'll pay for this with blood." Marcus slid out of the ring, heart pounding. He'd done the unthinkable. He'd shown the entire underground circuit that he wouldn't throw a fight. The ring still echoed with the weight of his choice, reverberating through every silent onlooker. He felt fear gnaw at his insides, yet a strange surge of pride flickered alongside it. As he stumbled back into the corridor, Domino's voice followed him like a curse. "Dead man walking, Gates. Dead man walking." Marcus walked away from the secret auditorium with shaky steps, hearing Domino's voice echo in his mind. Dead man walking. A part of him wanted to collapse. Another part blazed with the conviction that, no matter what happened, he wouldn't be bullied into submission. The adrenaline from knocking out Diesel still fluttered in his chest, yet victory had never felt so bittersweet. By refusing to throw the fight, he declared open war on Domino's crew, and possibly the corrupt underbelly of Ravenwood itself. He returned to Block D, the hush of late-night corridors oppressively silent. Reese immediately noticed Marcus's bruised knuckles and the haunted look in his eyes. "You fought again." Marcus sank onto his bunk, pressing a trembling hand over his face. "They forced me into some underground ring. Wanted me to take a dive." Reese's eyes widened. "And you didn't?" Marcus shook his head. I couldn't do it. I knocked out Diesel. Domino's furious. Domino always keeps his promises, Reese muttered, face grim. You can bet he's planning something worse. A chill rippled through Marcus. He'd made a choice to stay true to himself, and possibly forfeited his safety. I can't give in. Reese gave a solemn nod. Stick to that. Just keep an eye out. Every second. Morning arrived, bringing flickering fluorescent lights and the rhythmic clang of cell doors. Marcus joined the shuffle to breakfast, shoulders taut with tension. He scanned the chow hall. Domino was absent, but Diesel's battered face told a clear story. Bruised jaw, bandaged cheek. The moment Diesel spotted Marcus, his lips curled in a hateful scowl. Curtis approached softly. So Ruber said you refused to play along. The Serpents lost a big bet. Domino's pride took a big hit, too. Marcus exhaled shakily. I'm not going to cheat. I've got an appeal hearing on the horizon. I won't ruin that. Curtis nodded. Word is, Domino's made you the prison's #1 target. He's probably working with the warden or bribing guards to stay out of the way if things go south. Marcus swallowed. That scenario felt all too real. He forced a mouthful of oatmeal, ignoring the furious looks from Diesel's table. Still, a sliver of hope kept him going. His attorney's last letter mentioned the witness's willingness to testify sooner rather than later. If Marcus could hold on just a little longer. That afternoon, Officer Lively gestured for Marcus to follow him into a narrow utility hallway. The guard looked tense. Listen, Lively said quietly, glancing around, I heard about your stunt last night. Word is Domino's planning payback. Marcus's heart pounded. I figure as much. Lively shifted, lowering his voice. I'm not supposed to say this, but the warden and certain guards want the hush money from the Serpents. You ruined a profitable show by refusing to take a dive. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. So now everyone's against me. Not everyone, Lively said firmly. I hate seeing bullies run the place. If something big goes down, I'll try to help, but you'll need evidence to bring Domino or the warden down. Otherwise, they'll bury you with false reports. Marcus stared at him. Evidence? Lively nodded. Find proof the warden's involved, then maybe your lawyer can bring it up in court. This place could blow wide open. Marcus exhaled. I'll keep that in mind, thanks. He wasn't sure how he'd collect proof, but the guard's words planted a spark of possibility. If he exposed the corruption, maybe the warden's intimidation would crumble. But that mission felt daunting in a place where contraband phones and secret ledgers were hidden behind layers of threats. 2 nights later, Domino cornered Marcus in the laundry room again. This time, Diesel and Jax were absent. Domino arrived with just Pablo, who sported fresh tattoos on his biceps. The overhead light flickered ominously, and the hiss of washing machines filled the silence. You messed up big, Domino spat. Cost us a fortune, not to mention humiliating Diesel. The Serpents want your head. Marcus planted his feet, bracing for a fight. Not my problem. Domino's mouth twisted. We can still salvage things if you do one final match. Let Diesel beat you publicly. That'll smooth everything over. I'll even pay you in tokens. Marcus clenched his fists. I'm done with your fights. You people wanted me to cheat. I won't. Pablo rolled his shoulders, fist ready. Domino's glare seethed with hatred. So that's your final answer? Stubborn fool. Inwardly, Marcus quaked at the look in Domino's eyes. Yes, leave me alone. Domino scoffed. Then I hope you said goodbye to your family, because soon you'll be worthless to us and to your own appeal. Marcus's pulse thundered. One misstep now could lead to a knife in the dark or a concocted accident. But he held his ground. I'm not afraid of you, Domino. Domino shook his head. You should be. He spun on his heel, Pablo right behind him. Their footsteps faded, leaving Marcus alone with the echo of laundry machines. A chill danced up his spine. He just sealed his fate. The next day, Curtis pulled Marcus aside in the yard. His face was paler than usual. I overheard Domino talking. They're gonna do something big, something that might land you in the infirmary, or worse. Marcus's gut twisted. When? Curtis shook his head. Soon. Domino asked the Serpents to lure you to the showers or an isolated hallway. They might use a shiv this time. No more cheap shots. Marcus swallowed dryly. If he ended up stabbed, that would either kill him or ruin any chance of an appeal. But he refused to live in constant hiding. Thanks for the warning, he said quietly. He weighed his options. Maybe he could hide in the cell, but eventually, Domino would track him down. Another approach flickered in his mind. Collect evidence of Domino's corruption, then turn it over to Lively. If the Serpents implicated the warden, that might blow the scandal wide open. But how? That evening, Marcus hunted for Tuck, the contraband peddler, finding him idling by the library shelves. Tuck's eyes darted nervously at the sight of Marcus. What do you want?" Marcus lowered his voice. "I need your help. I need proof of the warden's underground fights. Anything. Payoff ledgers, schedules, names." Tuck's face went pale. "You're asking me to dig my own grave. The serpents or Domino find out, I'm done." "I know," Marcus whispered. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. I'm innocent of the crime that put me here. I've got an appeal soon. If you help me expose them, you might help end Domino's stranglehold." Tuck fidgeted, clearly torn. "I'll see what I can find. But no promises. If I get caught, I'll deny everything." Marcus nodded. "Understood. Thanks." He walked away, pulse pounding. Tuck might back out or feed him false info, but it was the only lead he had. If Tuck came through, perhaps Lively could smuggle the evidence out to Marcus's lawyer. That might not only topple the warden's racket, but also protect Marcus from Domino's revenge. Time felt agonizingly slow. Each day, Marcus scanned the corridors, expecting Domino's gang to leap out with a blade. He tried staying in plain sight where guards patrolled more frequently, but Domino seemed to wait for the perfect moment. Reese noticed Marcus's constant anxiety. "You can't live like this. If Tuck finds something, do you have a plan?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Get the proof to Lively. Hope it cripples Domino's operation and spooks him enough to leave me alone until I'm free." Reese chewed on his lip. A big gamble. Marcus stared at the battered watch on his wrist. "I have no choice." Tuck approached Marcus a few nights later near the cell block showers. He pressed a small folded note into Marcus's palm, eyes darting side to side. "Saw some ledger pages in the Serpent's bunk. Couldn't grab them, but I learned about a secret meeting. Domino's collecting hush money from the warden tomorrow night in the old storage room." Marcus's pulse quickened. This was the break he needed. Catch Domino and maybe the warden red-handed. What time? Late. "Around midnight," Tuck whispered. Marcus tucked the note into his waistband. "Thanks," he breathed. The plan crystallized. If he and Curtis, maybe even Lively, could witness that payoff, it might be enough evidence to blow the operation apart. Close to midnight, Marcus crept through the cell block. He'd managed to slip a message to Lively earlier, scribbled on a scrap of paper. Midnight, storage room. Domino, proof. Curtis insisted on coming along, unwilling to let Marcus face the danger alone. Heart pounding, they lurked behind stacked crates near the storage room entrance. Their vantage point offered a narrow line of sight. At first, the room was dim and empty. Minutes ticked by like hours. Then footsteps echoed in the corridor. Domino appeared with Pablo, carrying a small duffel bag. Moments later, Warden Phillips walked in, accompanied by a guard Marcus recognized as one of Domino's men. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The warden removed an envelope from his jacket, handing it to Domino. Domino smirked, unzipped the duffel, and displayed stacks of canteen tokens and contraband packets. The men exchanged hushed words about tonight's profits. Curtis's eyes widened. "They're splitting earnings from the underground fights," he whispered. Marcus inched forward, heart hammering. If Lively made good on his promise, he'd show up with backup. But if not, Marcus had to do something. If they couldn't catch the warden in the act, Domino would remain invincible. Just then, the door banged open. Officer Lively burst in, flanked by two other guards. Their batons were raised, tension sizzling in the air. "Freeze," Lively barked. Domino spun, face contorted. The warden cursed under his breath. One of the crooked guards lunged, but Lively's men subdued him with a swift blow. Domino tried to flee, clutching the envelope, but Marcus sprang from hiding, blocking the exit. "This ends now," Marcus said, voice tight. Domino glared, fists clenching. "You're dead, Gates." But the arrival of more guards cut off Domino's bravado. The warden hissed, stepping back as Lively seized the duffel bag. "Warden Phillips, you're under investigation for corruption," Lively announced, voice unsteady but resolute. The warden's eyes darted frantically, but he couldn't escape. The evidence was laid bare: hush money, tokens, contraband. Domino sank into a corner, face twisted in fury, as the guards pinned him and Pablo against the wall. Marcus stood motionless, adrenaline surging through his veins. He had no illusions that this was neat or simple. The warden would deny wrongdoing. Domino might blame everything on him. But at least they were caught red-handed, and Lively had seen it all. Over the following days, a whirlwind of investigations rocked Ravenwood. Warden Phillips was suspended pending formal charges. Several corrupt guards were arrested, and Domino was transferred to a higher security block. The tension in the prison lifted, as if a fever had broken. Marcus, though anxious, suddenly found life calmer. No more threats or extortion. Curtis clapped him on the shoulder when they passed in the corridor. "You did it. This place might finally change." Marcus managed a relieved smile. Couldn't have done it without help. A week later, his attorney Brian arrived with earth-shattering news. The key witness had testified. A judge ordered Marcus's release pending a new trial. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes as he packed up his few belongings. The legal system had taken months to correct its mistake, but at last the sun rose on the possibility of freedom. On a crisp morning, an officer opened the steel gates. Marcus stepped onto the outside pavement, the sky startlingly bright. His parents waited nearby, faces lit with joy. Marcus moved toward them, each footstep lighter than the last. The memory of Ravenwood's cold cells and Domino's cruelty began to fade. Looking over his shoulder one final time, he thought of the lonely inmates he was leaving behind. Curtis, Reese, even Tuck. Perhaps the prison's future would be safer now that the corruption had been exposed. The wind brushed his face, reminding him that a life beyond these walls still existed. Free at last, Marcus walked forward. He vowed never to forget those darkest days, days that tested his conscience and forced him to fight in a world without referees. But he'd stayed true to who he was, a champion unwilling to throw a match, whether in or out of the ring.